Good morning. Thank you for being here. Thanks to the worship committee for having me. And I've got to say, I'm really pleased to see my friend Len Mosey in the audience, back from West Virginia. I know Len's going to give me a thorough critique when we meet later this week. Standing here, I'm reminded of a radio ad that I've been hearing a lot lately. A guy comes on and says, I'm Joe Blow, the timeshare cancellation guy, and I want to set the record straight. I am not an attorney. Well, I'm not a preacher. And I don't really have even a conventional sermon for you today. You know, beginning, middle, end, lesson, moral. But I hope that what I brought conveys something meaningful, something maybe you'll recognize, and maybe something to think about. I've written it up as 5 sketches or vignettes, drawn mostly from my life, but also other things. And I hope that they amplify the message, the themes of today's reading. And I call the first vignette Millie's Moon. Caveat here, I guess. I'm going to read from a script, unlike a good preacher who can just go. So, thank you. I'll always remember the night that Myrna's mother died in July of 1997 at her home in Goshen, Indiana. She was terrific, and the experience of her death was bracing, even though it followed a long illness. One of my strongest memories is the gorgeous spectral moon that night. It was hanging in the west as we drove home from Walter and Millie's after Millie's body had been removed. That moon, so silver and bright, has always reminded me of a certain last stanza by Elizabeth Bishop. The shooting stars in your black hair, in bright formation, are flocking where, so straight, so soon. Come, let me wash it in this big tin basin, battered and shiny like the moon. Wow, such vivid images. I think it's cool, too, how the poem so deftly braids the human and the cosmic scales and expresses it through this simple human gesture of washing hair. Her glistening hair like shooting stars, that humble basin so like the moon. But driving home that night, the moon didn't seem that friendly. It seemed completely indifferent to our sorrow, our experience, even our existence. It was just an old dead rock that couldn't possibly care, locked in tight embrace with the earth high above. But on reflection, I've come to think that the moon that night was not indifferent, but simply bearing silent witness in the night. The lesson seemed to be earth and moon eternally paired, life and death inescapably paired. Now, who knows? I might have felt the same way on a cloudy night, but it just so happened to me moonlit, and I took great comfort from that in our dark hour. I'm trying to have my friendly face instead of my game face, but you know, I tend toward the game face, so I apologize. Some years ago, I fell into conversation with a Baptist minister at his church in downtown South Bend. He was outside sweeping, I was out walking, and we started talking. You know, the usual, the weather, the Cubs, that kind of thing. But I had the religion beat at my newspaper at that time, and we went a little deeper. I told him that I wasn't conventionally religious, but that I am awed, overwhelmed by creation's mystery and majesty. I said, it stirs me with palpable reverence. I can feel it. In fact, I told him, I believe that creation itself, including the mere fact that it happened, is as holy as anything I know. The pastor countered gently. You're confusing creation with the Creator, he said. A rookie mistake. I tried again. God is creation, is God is creation, is God is creation. You can't separate them any more than snow from white. Well, as you might guess, the pastor and I didn't convince each other that day. But it reminds me of a story that maybe you've heard. It was a long time ago, and a boy asked an elder about the shape of the cosmos. The ancient woman said, the earth stands on 4 great elephants who stand atop the great mottled shell of Mother Tortoise. And below her, the boy asked, another tortoise. And below her, the elder paused. I know where you're going, sonny, but believe me, it's turtles all the way down. Mother Teresa's costume ball. I once heard a story about Mother Teresa that probably didn't happen, but I like the ending. It should be true. It goes like this. Mother Teresa practically detested one of the women who belonged to the order of nuns that Mother Teresa had founded. You know how some people just don't like the cut of your jib? It was like that. Worse, the 2 nuns worked in relative proximity, caring for the desperately poor of Calcutta, so they couldn't really avoid each other. Mother Teresa was deeply troubled, because it was awkward, yes, but also because her entire ministry was based on the gospel message of love. Yet for some reason, she couldn't extend that love to her colleague. Now, the story doesn't say exactly how Mother Teresa prayed or puzzled this out, but we know what she said when she finally figured it out. Here comes Jesus, disguised as that annoying person, which suggests our first UU principle, which affirms every person's inherent worth and dignity, every person. It also echoes the complementary Hindu principles of Atman, or God immanent, within us, all around us, and Brahman, or God transcendent, far away. It's of some interest, I think, that imminent, spelled one way, means something's about to happen. You know, the storm is imminent, death is imminent. But spelled another way, it means something that's pervasive or all-encompassing. I think both of them apply to Mother Teresa. God suffused her life and ministry, God immanent. And when she finally saw Jesus in her friend, God was about to happen, God immanent. As I said, the story may not be true, but it should be. God in a foxhole. I'm fortunate never to have fought in war. Call it the luck of timely birth. But I had an experience one night that might illustrate the adage that there are no atheists in foxholes. Let me explain. Driving home one night after a late shift on the copy desk, I hit and killed a rabbit on County Road 28 outside of Elkhart. It came from nowhere. I couldn't possibly have avoided it. But I hated that this beautiful, innocent creature had fallen victim to me in my roaring car. God, I said, I am sorry. Please, God, don't let it suffer. The mind works so fast. Simultaneously, I was processing remorse, helplessness, sorrow, and the invocation of a personal or intercessionary God who I once believed in. The fact is, I didn't have the right at that moment. I didn't have the bona fides to call on such a God. I felt the disconnect keenly. But what other language could I use? My head said, there's no being or figure named God who can hear you or help you or somehow ease the rabbit's pain. But my heart cried out to something greater than me, greater than the rabbit, using old words for my old beliefs that I wanted in that moment to be true. Heart and head aren't always in sync, are they? But what would have been the greater inconsistency? To feel bad and let it pass as a merely sad event? Or to call to God as I did in what seemed to me to be an existential moment? If I'm ever in a foxhole, I think you know what kind of atheist I'll be. Somnambulisma, crazy name. The Manistee River drains an extensive, heavily forested watershed in northern Michigan before entering the Big Lake about 300 miles north of here. It's alternately fast and slow, shallow and deep, which is fun but safe for amateur kayakers like me. On one such outing, a stiff wind and waves forced me across a large open stretch of water where the navigation charts show an average depth of 25 feet. I wasn't afraid, but I wasn't exactly comfortable. Worse, I had to go back against the wind and current, and I had no earthly idea how. Surprisingly well, as it turned out, and I found myself in shallow waters under a brilliant sun with silence all around. The kayak bobbed, the clear water lapped and sparkled over the undulating sand, and I felt completely one with my surroundings, completely one with nature, as far could be from my sad little cubicle in the concrete city. I felt deeply reverent, deeply at peace. Relaxing in the sunshine, I thought of that episode from The Wind in the Willows when rat and mole catch the briefest glimpse of Pan at sunrise, the piper at the gates of dawn. And I remembered something that Joseph Campbell said in one of his many books about mythology. Quote, "The fundamental religious experience is the apprehension of the numinous." Numinous, spiritually elevated or sublime, as if aware of a presence or a layer of reality that can't be named. But what does it mean to say the apprehension of the numinous? I wasn't anxious, I wasn't fearful, I wasn't uneasy, but I can't say that I comprehended the experience, which suggests rational understanding. I was simply conscious on an emotional and purely sensory level of a pervasive unity that encompassed me and everything around me. I've thought since then of a poem called Somnambulisma, roughly sleepwalking. In it, the poet Wallace Stevens describes an ocean and the endless lapping of water on rock and sand, and of the birds flying and nesting, unable to name their world or anything beyond it, but simply live. Stevens tells us that only the mind can apprehend the world. Only mind can name the world holy. Only mind can call it sacred. It's a gift and privilege reserved for us, and it feels very special. I'll close with just a few lines from another poem by Stevens about a dreamer waking to a bird's cry in the early March wind. He writes, "That scrawny cry outside, it was a chorister whose sea preceded the choir. It was part of the colossal sun, surrounded by its coral rings, still far away. It was like a new knowledge of reality." This is my prayer. Thank you.